Hello, how you doing? So today I want to look at tracking bass with UAD plugins. So if that's something you're interested in, stick around. Okay, so you might have seen one of my previous videos which was tracking vocals with UAD plugins. I'll put a little link up the top there so you can go to it if you want to see it. I'm actually using a very similar methodology and actually much of the same plugins. So the whole point of this is I want to be using plugins which essentially come for free with your UAD device. So I'm using an Apollo Twin MK2, but you'll generally get these ones for free. So you could use lots of other plugins as well, but I'm just trying to start with the ones which chances are you already have anyway. So it does beg the question, why are we tracking with plugins in the first place? Why don't we just track it completely dry and have nothing on there so you can do what you want to it afterwards? That's a great train of thought too. But the thing with this is we're not adding loads and loads of process, and all we're doing is we're cleaning things up, we're adding a bit of compression to make it to even it out a little bit and to make it sound a bit better, and also to make it feel better, so it feels better when you're actually playing. So that's one of the big parts of this. It doesn't mean that you're not going to do any processing later. You're definitely going to be doing loads of things, but this just puts you in a good place to start off with. I tend to track with plugins all the time, even if it's just using a little bit, and I think it makes a big difference. Now, before we dive in, if you haven't liked and subscribed, please do all of those things that you need to do. If you sign up to the mailing list, also, I will send you some free stuff, which will be an EQ cheat sheet and some one-shot drum hits that you can use in your mixes. So anyway, let's dive in. Okay, so I am using a Warwick Corvette, which is quite a nice bass actually, and what I'm doing is I'm going to go straight into the Apollo. So I'm not using any fancy DI box. But I do have quite a nice one, and I will often use that. But just for the sake of this, I'm going to go straight into the Apollo. Let's just have a little listen to what it sounds like to start off with, and then I'm going to engage all the plugins just so you can hear the difference, and then I'm going to break it down. Right, let's put on the plugins. Now, hopefully you're hearing a difference there, and that there really is, it just sounds much stronger, it sounds much thicker, and it's just already just putting us in a much nicer place. So let's break down the plugins and see what we've got going on. So I'm going to disable all. Now, part one is the preamp. Now, this should come with any Apollo device, so you should get this one for free. Already, just engaging it is going to give you just a little bit more vibe, a little bit more color. So this is essentially a tube preamp. So you're going through a tube, which is always nice for bass. So let's take that off. Put it in. It's quite subtle, but it does add something. Now, additionally, I'm going to add a little bit of EQ to this because the EQ in this is really, really nice. So we've got two little dip switches here. So we're going to add a little bit at 100 Hertz just to give it a little bit more low end. And then over here, we're going to take a little bit at 4.5K. Okay, so both we're just going about 1.5 dB up. So not too much. It's just a touch, but it does make a difference. It just helps to give it a little bit more low end and a little bit more bite on the top. If I take that off, hopefully you'll hear a bit of a difference of that already. Let's put it back on. Okay, so already we've got a little bit more going on, a little bit more vibe, a little bit more energy. Next up is the Precision EQ, another one which comes completely for free. Now, I've got a few different options on here, so I'm adding just a little bit more low end because why not? This is about 118 Hertz. It can be anywhere between 1 and 120 really is what you're kind of what you're trying to add in there. Fairly narrow Q, but nothing, nothing too drastic. And then you've got a little bit more mid-range. I find this is a little bit of a magic frequency, so around 750 Hertz is really, really nice, and it just helps to sit the bass in the mix straight away. So have a little bit of that. I'm having a bit more of that one. So we're going to have about 1.5, 1.6 dB in the low end, just under 5 dB in the mid-range, and then we've got the upper mids. We're also going to add about 2 dB at about 2K. So let's just engage that, and then I'll take it off and you can just see the difference. take it off. See, already it's starting to poke out just a little bit more. Now, these frequencies aren't necessarily set in stone. You can adjust the how much you're putting in, you know, how much you're adding, dependent on taste, essentially, and dependent on the song. So I want a little bit more presence because I quite like that in the bass. But if you're doing something where you're focusing much more on the kind of low end, like say you're using flat wounds or something, you want it a little bit more waffy, you know, you might use just a little bit less on the mids. You might want to just like boost those lows a little bit more and just really get that vibe right away. But just bear in mind, you do need some definition in there too, so don't be afraid to chuck in the mids, because chances are when it gets to a mixing stage, you're going to be boosting some mids, or whoever's doing the mix, whether it be you or somebody else, they're going to be boosting the mids because you want to be able to hear that. You want to be able to hear that on different speakers. You want to hear it in the mix. You want it to be coming through the mix. So having a little bit more mid in there is, chances are, not going to hurt too much, but it is a subjective choice. So do play around with that. The main point of this is you're trying to carve this into your track right away. So like I say, it is song dependent, it is taste dependent. Use these frequencies as a little bit of a ballpark to add or take away if you're feeling like it needs it in a track. The main thing is we're trying to get it mix ready to start off with, or just to get closer to the sound that's in your head in the first place. Okay, so part 3 of 4 is this fella here. So we've got the Teletronix LA2A. Again, it's another valve unit. So I do like valves. They make things better, I think, in lots of cases, but certainly in bass. I really do like them in bass. This particular one is not doing very much. And like I said before, if you saw my tracking vocals with UAD Plugins previous video, you'll see that I'm kind of using a very similar thing here. With this one, I'm barely even touching it. I'm just going to do just a tiny little bit of compression because we're more going for the vibe and the color that it's adding. It's just giving it just a little bit more definition. So let's take it off and then put it on. And engaged. Okay, and we'll just take it off again. Once more in. Okay, so as you'll notice, all I'm doing is I'm compressing about 1 dB. That's not very much at all. It's very, very subtle. And it's, although we're using it to add a little bit of color, it's also helping to just control the sound just a little bit. So those initial peaks, the ones that really stick out, it's just helping to just bring those back just a little bit. So it just starts to even it out just a little bit. But this isn't doing much of the heavy lifting. This is just it's almost like a pre-compressor to the actual compressor, which is coming up next. Okay, so this last one is the Universal Audio 1176. I'd say this is one of the best compressors ever made. It's definitely one of my favorite compressors ever made. So versatile and so vibey. So we're using the blue stripe, or revision A, I believe. Right, so all we're going to be doing is we're going to be setting a ratio to about 4:1. We don't want to be having it do a crazy amount, but you can of course adjust that to your track if you need to. With the attack and release, we're going to go for a medium fast attack with a pretty fast release. So in case you're not familiar with the controls on 1176, it kind of goes the other way around to what you're expecting it to be. So this end is fast, this end is fast, this end is slow, this end is slow. Okay, so what you can do, this is a really great setting to start off with, and often is where I will start with bass, but you can adjust it depending on the track. So if you've got something very fast or very energetic, you might want it to have a slightly faster attack because you want it to be just clamping down on those notes a little bit more. But just that's the one that you really adjust depending on the track, so mainly the attack. Right, so let's engage it, and I'm just going to play, and then we're going to take it off and put it back on again so you see what it's doing. And we want to give it a good amount of compression. Again, you can choose how much you need. It will be dependent on the track. I know I keep saying that, but it's just a fact. But I tend to give it a good chunk. I'm probably going to be going about 5 dB or maybe a little bit more on some of the peaks. So let's have a little look. Yeah, that's peaking between about 5 and 7. So definitely get a little bit of work going on there. Let's take it out. It's doing quite a lot, that one, isn't it? Let's go back in. It's clearly making a difference. Not only with the sound is it making a difference. One of the really important things to point out here, and it's something you can't tell because you're at the other end, you're just watching, you're not actually playing this bass guitar or trying to play this bass guitar. The thing that I'm really getting from this is it's making it just that much easier to play, and it's helping to even out my playing, my sloppy playing, and it just helps to make it it feels a little bit more forgiving. You know, if I'm not quite hitting some of those notes quite hard enough, it's helping to pick up the slack. If I'm smashing some notes out and they're not as consistent as some of the other ones, then it's starting to just even it out. So it really does make a big difference. So what we're going to do now is just have another little listen of the before and after, just so you can hear all of them in action. And hopefully you'll agree that it is making a lovely difference and it sounds magnificent. This is without the plugins. And now we're going to engage the plugins. Let's do it one more time. I'll try and play it as similar as I can. And let's put them back in. Yeah. Now, one last thing to mention. What about if we don't want to record these plugins? What about if we think it sounds great, but we're just not bold enough to commit? You should commit. You should do it anyway, because the whole point of this is that if you're feeling good when you were doing it, if it was sounding right when you were doing it, then just print that, just send that, just let it happen, make it happen. But you do have a get out of jail free if you don't want to. So in case you didn't know about this, on all of these channels here you've got UAD record or monitor. So it's basically what it's saying is, do you want to record what you have in these inserts? So anything that you play that's going into Logic, Pro Tools, whatever, do you want that to be bounced or printed into the track as well? If so, go with record. If you don't want it to do that, then you just do monitor. So that means that you're just going to be hearing it. You're just going to be playing along with this and doing a wonderful job and feeling great, but it's not going to be printing that. So it will still be printing it dry. You know, it's not going to take any of the plugins at all. The way I tend to have things set up is I leave it on record all the time, because if I'm adding a plugin, then I see that as I'm putting it through something in a rack. I'm now putting my bass through this compressor, this compressor, which is sitting right here. Imagine your compressor. I wish I did have a rack there. And then I'm going to choose to patch that into the next one. And then that is going to go into my desk and I'm going to record it. And if I like it, then I'm going to hit record. But if I don't like it, I'm going to adjust it until I like it. So that's how I generally do things. And I feel like you get better results if you just make the commitment at first. But you do have the option to take it out if you don't want to. If you decide you want to do that, so to not record with the plugins on, what about when we get into Logic or Pro Tools or whatever you're using and you really liked those plugins, you want to bring the sound back? Well, there is a bit of a workaround to do so. It's not the best, but what you could do is each plugin, load it up, and then the setting that you've chosen, all of the moves that you've made, save that. So save it into the directory of the plugin itself. Okay, so for example, we could go, let's go bass folder. Here we go, and we're going to save it in there, and we're going to call it bass EQ. Boom. So that means that because it's saved into the plugin itself, when you load that plugin up in whatever DAW you're using, you can just recall that setting and it will be there. If you save the plugin setting within the DAW itself, then depending on which DAW you're using, it's not always going to be there. Or it might be that you're using Logic sometimes and you're using Pro Tools on other times. So the safest thing is to just save it into the plugin itself. Then it will appear on everything that you're using. Okay, and that is it. That is how I track bass with UAD plugins. Of course, you can add lots of different ones as well. There's lots of different EQs you might want to change out with the ones that I'm using, but I was just trying to use ones which already came installed with your unit. It can be a really nice one, for example, to use an API plugin. They work fantastically with bass. So if you've got one of those, then definitely change that out for the precision EQ that we had in there. Change that out and slap that in, because that will do some magical things, I promise you. So thank you very much for watching. I hope that's helped. I hope it's made you think a little bit, and I hope it's helped to get a bass guitar in a good place for your mix. Okay, see you next time. Bye for now.